Not to leave you without any good news, there is some. Liz, why don't you give us that?
Well, it's nice to have a new voice in the battle with the Vatican. Jordan Peterson, the Canadian, John Henry, slammed Pope Francis's fixation on climate change and said, rightly so, that Pope Francis should be saving souls. And he talked about his fixation on climate change, and he said that's not working. It's shallow, slamming the guitar and hippies that proliferated the church in the 60s and after Vatican II.
This is so good. Let's just play the clip because you'll see what I mean. Watch this.
When we look at the Catholic Church and its decline in recent years, less young people going, less people signing up for a religious life, and since you could say the 60s.
Well, if it's all guitar and hippies, who the hell cares?
But since Vatican II, let's say in the 60s, the church has been aiming to be more relevant, more welcoming. So what's the problem?
That's not working. It's shallow, obviously. Shallow and contemptible. You know, it's supposed to be an invitation to the great adventure of life. What's the great adventure of life? Pick up your cross and follow me. Like, that's a hell of an invitation, but that's the invitation. And the church lost faith in that. We have to be relevant. Well, what's more relevant than that? As soon as you say that you need to be more relevant than that, what you're doing technically is putting something else above that. Well, that's not going to work, not if the original proposition was correct. And obviously the original proposition is correct. You might say, well, why obviously? Okay, well, Christ faced and triumphed over death and hell. And you might say, well, why is that relevant? And the answer is, because that's what you have to do. Right, and everyone, you're stuck with it.
So is the Catholic Church not challenging people enough?
Definitely not enough, not by any stretch of the imagination. The gateway to paradise is barred by the cherubs who have swords that flame and turn every which way. Well, what does that mean? It means it's hard to get into the club, man. Anything that isn't worthy gets cut and burned away. Well, of course, that's hell, especially if you resist it. Really. And there's no sugarcoating that, and that isn't what people want anyways. Young people want an adventure. Why the hell do you think they're so concerned with saving the planet, which Pope Francis seems to be on about constantly, when he should be saving souls? That's how you save the planet, not by worshipping Gaia.
Do you think Pope Francis puts the emphasis in the wrong places sometimes?
Well, I gave you that example. I don't see, for the life of me, what the Catholic Church has to do with climate crisis. Just the formulation is wrong. The priority is wrong. You save the world one person at a time. It lacks faith in its own mission.
You know what I loved about that? He says it with such disdain, with such obvious, disdain, properly so, because this whole kind of banjo and circuses mass and the whole worship of Gaia. I loved when the EWTN host asked him about Pope Francis, and he said, yeah, the worship of Gaia, I already mentioned that example. That's just bang on. And said with the proper amount of animosity that it deserves. We all have to pray for Peterson, though, because I guess understandably so. He's finding it a hard time following his wife into converting into the church. And at this time, it's so difficult because he watches Pope Francis and he sees Pope Francis, obviously, and he knows the horrors that are going on. He's not a stupid man. It makes it very, very difficult for people who actually are intellectual enough to understand what the faith is, to go for it when we have such scandal going on right from the Pope.
Peterson is a man who understands the salvation of souls. He's a psychologist. Psychology is the study of souls, of the soul. And he understands what's necessary today is to save souls. He's been in that business for all of his life. When he sees that being abandoned by the church, yes, I can understand why it would be difficult for him to even imagine becoming a Catholic today.
Yeah.
A lot of people have written me who have become Catholics in the last couple of years, and they're in crisis. New Catholics. So I understand that.
Yeah.
But he's absolutely right. The church is about the salvation of souls. That's what it's about. We've lost our way, unfortunately.